For centuries, humans had been regarded as second-class beings in the galaxy. On the distant mining planet Kalra, human slaves were forced to work, both physically and mentally drained. This planet was rich in strategic mineral deposits, making it invaluable to other civilizations. Humanity toiled under these harsh conditions, believing they had no choice but to serve the elite civilizations of the galaxy. Over time, hopelessness became the norm among the slaves. Yet in the midst of this despair, a clever engineer named Roderick was quietly preparing to ignite the spark of rebellion. Roderick was different from the others. His engineering skills had allowed him to study the machinery used in the mines and the planet's defense systems. He had come to understand the inner workings of Kalra in great detail and had begun searching for a way to escape. To him, slavery was not a destiny but a temporary situation. The only thing left was to wait for the right moment. One evening, after his shift ended, Roderick secretly met with his trusted friends, Caleb and Vivian. They gathered in a small storage room, one of the dark, hidden corners of the mine, a place so insignificant that no one ever visited. The only light came from Roderick's stone lantern, casting a faint glow in the dim room. "What are we doing here, Rod?" Caleb asked, frowning. "This could be the end of us." Vivian scanned the room with her eyes. Her voice carried both curiosity and unease. "What are you planning?" she asked. Roderick leaned in closer to his friends and began speaking in a low voice. "This can't go on. We're not just slaves. They don't see our potential. We can use their mistakes to win our freedom." Caleb shook his head, skeptical. "How? No one's ever escaped from here. The security is too tight." Roderick placed a small hologram device next to his lantern. With a few taps, he brought up a map of Kalra's security system and the mine's strategic points. "We can disable the security systems. It's all engineering. I know the weaknesses behind these machines and systems. If we strike at the right time, we can hijack a ship and escape from this hell." Vivian stared at the map, taking a deep breath. "It seems impossible, but there's hope," she said. When her eyes met Roderick's, she saw the determination in them. "What do we need to do?" Roderick laid out his plan. They would sabotage the machines in the mine in small but critical ways. These disruptions would keep the guards and the planet's ruling class occupied for a while, giving them a window to deactivate the security systems. At the same time, they would organize the other slaves and orchestrate a mass escape. Caleb placed a hand on Roderick's shoulder. "But what if we fail? They'll kill us." Roderick narrowed his eyes as he looked at him. "If we don't try, we're already dead." Vivian nodded silently. Despite the fear inside her, this was an opportunity. "I'm in," she said. And so, the first steps of the resistance were taken. Roderick worked late into the night, secretly refining the sabotage plan. He reached out to trusted people among the slaves working in the mines. Everything had to go perfectly. The smallest mistake could mean the end for everyone. As days passed, Roderick, Caleb, and Vivian identified the machines they would sabotage, gathered the necessary equipment, and informed the other slaves. The day of sabotage and escape was set. The plan would go into motion in just a few days. That night, Roderick, Caleb, and Vivian met again. There was no turning back now. Everything would either succeed or end that night. As Roderick looked over the map in his hands, he said, "This is our last chance." Caleb took a deep breath. "If we succeed, we won't just free ourselves, we'll free everyone living here." Vivian, with determination in her eyes, added, "We'll fight for our freedom together." By morning, everything was ready. The slaves on Kalra were about to launch the greatest escape in history. On the morning of the workday in Kalra, the slaves were preparing to begin their duties as usual. However, something was different that day. A quiet excitement, a subtle tension lingered in the air. Roderick, Caleb, and Vivian were more cautious and alert than ever. The sabotage plan was set to unfold that day, and everything had to go perfectly. As Roderick entered the mine, he quickly scanned the machines that were part of the plan. Each one awaited sabotage. His task was to disable the energy transmission system used in the mine. Caleb, working on the load transportation system, would weaken the machines to cause a collapse. Vivian was responsible for sabotaging the security cameras and surveillance systems, ensuring the guards couldn't follow them during their escape. Each task was critical. As Roderick moved deeper into the mine, his hands trembled slightly. This could be the last day of his life as a slave, or the end of their lives altogether. The uncertainty both frightened and motivated him. There was no turning back now. Caleb approached the load transportation system, a heavy tool in hand. After quickly glancing around to ensure no one was watching, he got to work. The small explosive he planted at a weak point in the system was a key part of the plan. The explosion would temporarily distract the guards and buy them some time. Vivian had already prepared for her infiltration of the security control room. Disguised as a technician, she accessed the main surveillance system. Her eyes darted across the screens, and one by one, she began to disable the cameras. Soon, the screens were filled with nothing but black voids. "All clear," she whispered to herself. Everything was going according to plan. When Roderick reached the energy transmission system panel, he took a deep breath. He attached the small electronic device he had to the panel. The device would disrupt the energy flow and temporarily halt all the machines in the mine, neutralizing the security systems during their escape. When the device's light turned green, a smile crossed his face. This part of the plan was successfully completed. But not everything was going as planned. In a distant part of the mine, a group of guards had noticed the anomalies in the systems. "There's a problem," one of the guards shouted into his radio. "We've detected a disruption. Check it out." When Roderick, Caleb, and Vivian heard the voice over the radio, anxiety washed over them. The guards had realized something was wrong. They had to stall them before initiating the escape. Roderick quickly sent a message to his friends. "Is everything okay?" he asked Caleb. Caleb responded swiftly. "The explosive is set. The system could collapse any minute." Even though Vivian had disabled the security cameras, the guards' suspicions were making things difficult. They had increased the number of patrols. "They're on to us," Vivian said, her voice anxious. "We need to move. We can't wait any longer." Roderick made a quick decision. "All right, we're starting the escape plan now. Is everyone in position?" Vivian and Caleb confirmed over the radio. Everyone was ready. Roderick warned the slaves in the storage area. "Get ready. We're moving in a few minutes." Moments later, a loud explosion echoed through the mine. The device Caleb had placed had disabled the load transportation system. The guards rushed toward that part of the mine in response to the explosion. Chaos spread quickly. Machines toppled over, debris fell, and the sounds of shouting filled the air. While the guards were still trying to understand what was happening, Roderick and his team used the confusion to make their move. Roderick radioed the leaders among the slaves. "Now, everyone move." The slaves working in the mine began gathering at the pre-planned routes. They were all ready. This was the moment, either freedom or death. They started running in the opposite direction of where the guards had concentrated. Roderick, Vivian, and Caleb led the group toward the nearest hangar. The hangar was the most critical point of their escape. They needed to take control of a ship here. But the hangar's security was tighter than in other areas. Roderick knew this, and he realized that the most dangerous part of the plan was right here. When they reached the hangar doors, they saw that the guards had already gone on high alert. Armed patrols scanned the area. Roderick turned to Vivian. "Can you hack the system? We need to open the door." Vivian quickly pulled out a small device and connected it to the lock system. As her fingers danced across the keyboard, the approaching footsteps of the guards could be heard. Come on," Caleb whispered nervously, glancing around. A few seconds later, the door opened. "Got it," Vivian said, exhaling in relief. Roderick immediately signaled to the group. "Everyone inside, quick!" The group rushed into the hangar. They had to seize one of the ships, but that was not going to be easy. The guards were already on their trail. Gunfire echoed, bullets ricocheting off the walls. Amid the chaos, they pressed forward, but the number of guards was growing by the second. Caleb moved forward to execute the final step of the escape plan. "Hold them off! I'll get the ship running!" he shouted. While Roderick and Vivian engaged the guards, Caleb hurried to the ship's control panel. Getting the ship started was their only hope. When Caleb reached the ship's control panel, he knew he was racing against time. Behind him, Roderick and Vivian were pinned down under the constant fire of the guards. Bullets pierced through the walls, and the metallic clashing sounds echoed in Caleb's ears with each impact. "I need to get this working," he muttered, his hands sweating as he frantically tried to figure out the control panel. Roderick glanced back at Caleb for a moment. "How much longer?" he shouted, his voice barely audible over the explosions and gunfire. "1 more minute," Caleb replied, not taking his eyes off the control panel. The ship was an old model, and the startup protocols were proving more difficult than he had anticipated. Meanwhile, Vivian leaned closer to Roderick. "We can't hold them off much longer," she said. "The guards are closing in from every direction." Roderick gritted his teeth, not taking his eyes off the fight. "Hold on," he said. "Once Caleb gets the ship running, it'll all be over." Vivian noticed a small explosive strapped to her belt and quickly formulated a plan. "Roderick, we can use these," she said, holding up the explosive. Roderick glanced at her briefly and nodded. "Now's the time." Vivian swiftly threw the explosive in the direction the guards were advancing from. The device spun in the air for a moment before a loud explosion echoed through the hangar. The blast stunned the guards, giving them a few precious seconds. "Let's move," Roderick shouted to Vivian. "This is our chance." As Caleb unlocked the final connection on the control panel, the ship suddenly shuddered, and a low hum from the engines filled the room. "I did it!" he exclaimed, panting. "The ship's online." Roderick and Vivian breathed a sigh of relief, their eyes lighting up with a flicker of hope. "Everyone to the ship!" Roderick shouted. The other prisoners, having recovered after the explosion, rushed toward the ship's doors. But the guards weren't giving up. More soldiers and security drones began flooding through the hangar entrance. Roderick continued firing back as Caleb sealed the ship's doors and activated the launch sequence. "Are you ready?" Caleb asked, preparing to take off. Roderick leaped into the ship, Vivian following closely behind. "Go, get us out of here," Roderick yelled to Caleb. With a swift press of the launch button, Caleb initiated liftoff, and the ship began to rise slowly from the ground. Outside, the guards kept firing, but their bullets now bounced harmlessly off the thick metal hull of the ship. As the ship fully lifted and crashed through the hangar doors into the open sky, the hearts of the prisoners filled with a deep sense of hope. They were taking their first steps toward freedom. But this was only the beginning. As they ascended into Kalra's atmosphere, Caleb's eyes locked onto the ship's radar. "We've got a problem," he said, his voice trembling with concern. Roderick quickly moved to his side. "What is it?" "They're chasing us," Caleb replied, pointing to the radar. Security ships belonging to Kalra's defense forces were rapidly closing in on them. Roderick clenched his jaw and stared out of the ship's window. "Can we go any faster?" "This ship's an old model, but I'll do what I can," Caleb said, his hands moving rapidly over the controls. He maneuvered the ship as fast as possible, but the security vessels were gaining ground with every passing second. Vivian headed to the back of the ship to check the defense systems. "The ship's unarmed," she said, her voice filled with despair. "We have no way to fight back." Just then, a beam of light shot past the side of their ship. The security ships had started firing their laser weapons. "Caleb, hurry!" Roderick shouted, his heart racing. Caleb, drenched in sweat, tried to dodge the incoming fire with sharp maneuvers. "I'm doing everything I can, but this ship wasn't built for combat." Suddenly, something appeared on the radar. A large, unknown object was approaching them rapidly. "What is that?" Vivian whispered, pointing to the screen. As the object got closer, they realized it was an ancient warship, once used by human colonies. These ships had been abandoned for years, particularly in slave planets like Kalra. "This is a miracle!" Caleb breathed in disbelief. "We can use this ship." Roderick's eyes glimmered with hope as he looked at Caleb. "If we can take control of that ship, we can defeat all the forces chasing us." Their ship sped toward the massive warship, the security forces still firing at them from behind. With a final desperate maneuver, Caleb managed to guide their ship into the old warship's docking bay. "We're in," he said, breathing a sigh of relief. But the danger wasn't over yet. They had to reactivate the warship systems to secure their escape. Vivian rushed to the control panel. "If this ship doesn't start, we're done for," she said, her voice tense with urgency. Roderick turned to her and nodded. "This ship is our only shot at freedom." As Caleb and Vivian worked frantically to power up the ancient warship, the security forces began boarding from outside. Time was running out. Roderick drew his weapon and aimed it at the door. "If they break in, we won't be able to stop them," he warned. "Hurry up." Finally, Vivian's fingers danced over the controls, and the old ship rumbled to life. The engines slowly roared back into action. "We did it," Vivian said, smiling. "This ship is operational." Roderick lowered his weapon and stared out of the ship's window. "This is our freedom." Caleb took control of the ship and aimed its weapons at the pursuing forces. The ancient warship, now their most powerful weapon, unleashed its might. Roderick, Vivian, and Caleb watched as one by one, their enemies were destroyed. The slaves of Kalra were free, and the galaxy would never forget their rebellion. This small group, having won their freedom, didn't just change their own fate, they ignited a spark of hope for every enslaved person in the galaxy. I hope you had a good time. If you liked my story, do not forget to comment and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye, see you in the next story.